In the previous video, we did some comparative statics. We looked at the income effect, and the question we asked is, what happens to consumption of apples when price ratio stays the same and real income changes? The case we looked at is where real income increases and price ratio stays the same. Then we also looked at the substitution effect, which is the change in consumption of apples when price ratio changes and real income stays the same. Then the third effect we looked at is the price effect, and that is change in consumption of apples when price of one good falls and all other variables stay the same. And when price of one good falls, we know price ratio will change and so will real income. Now let us revisit substitution effect, and price of an apple changes and we keep the real income the same. And through substitution effect, what we have is quantity of apples at each given price of apple that this person will buy when we keep real income the same. And when we say we keep real income the same, we mean different budget lines are tangent to the same indifference curve. Or in other words, through substitution effect, we have information about price of apple as well as quantity demanded of apples. And if we plot these points where we have price of an apple on the vertical axis and quantity demanded of apples on the horizontal axis, we plot these points and we join them, and what we get is a curve, and this curve is called the compensated or Hickson demand curve. And what we find here is when there is a decrease in price, there is an increase in quantity demanded of apples. Next, we revisit price effect. And the question we asked is, when price of apples falls and all other variables, price of other goods and nominal income stay the same. Now through the price effect, what we have is an information on price of apples and different quantity demanded of apples. And so what we do is, once again, we plot price of apples against quantity demanded of apples based on the price effect. And we join these points, and what we get is a Marshallian or an ordinary demand curve. And once again, what we find here is, as price of an apple falls, quantity demanded based on price effect increases, or there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded of apples. Or in a way, this is a rigorous proof of the law of demand, and it shows that the demand curve is downward sloping. Another thing you should know is the difference between a Marshallian and a compensated demand curve. Marshallian demand curve is based on price effect. Compensated or Hickson demand curve is based on substitution effect. Now let us go back to the situation of price effect that we had considered in the previous video. And what we had was, in situation 1, nominal income of this person is $5, and price of an apple equals price of an orange, which is $1. Then we had situation 3, where nominal income stays the same as in situation 1. Price of orange again stays the same as in situation 1. The only thing which happens differently is price of an apple falls. And in price effect, this is what we try to understand, what happens to consumption of apples when price of an apple falls and all other things remain the same. When we studied price effect in the previous video, we looked at a similar diagram. We have budget line 1, which corresponds to situation 1. We have budget line 3, which corresponds to situation 3. We have consumer equilibrium, which is E1, and we also have a new consumer equilibrium E3, and we already know that A1, A3, let me just type this out, A1, A3 represents the price effect. We already know this. Now what we do is the following. We draw this green budget line, this one. We draw this budget line, green one, this one. And let us just call this BL4. Let me just type here, BL4. And let me just move this. This green budget line is BL4. Now, when you look at BL4, what you find is the following. BL4 has same price ratio, that is PA by PO, as BL3, and a lower real income relative to BL3. Here we go. And then you look at the relationship between BL1 and BL4, and what you find is the following, and that is BL4 has lower price ratio and the same real income as BL1. So we know this, and this is what the comparison of BL4. It's an artificial line that we have drawn. Now, this BL4 is tangent to the same indifference curve as BL1, so they have same real income, and so we would have a new equilibrium point here somewhere, here, and let us just call this E4. So we have E4. E4, and let me just move it here so you can see it at the point of tangency. Now, what we do next is we drop this E4 or this equilibrium point 4 to the horizontal axis, and how many apples would this person consume if we had this green budget line, which we have called BL4? It will be OA4. Now look at the following. We know A1, A3 is the price effect. Now just recall the definition of substitution effect. And what is substitution effect? It is A1, A4. So let me just type this out. Substitution effect is A1, A4. Here we have it. And now look at the movement from E4 to E3. E4 to E3. And what does this reflect? This reflects income effect. And how much is income effect? It is A4, A3. So we have the income effect A4, A3. Now suppose we decide to add up substitution and income effect, what will the distance be? It will be simply A1, A3, and that we already know is the price effect, PE or price effect. So what this diagram is telling you is the following. Number one, we can break down price effect into substitution and income effects, income and substitution effects. And what is the relationship between these three? It is price effect is a sum of substitution and income. What we have seen in the previous slide is the famous Slutsky's equation. And the Slutsky equation, what it does is it tells us price effect is a sum is equals the sum of substitution and income effect. And this should make intuitive sense. Why? Because income effect, what does it do? Change in real income and same price ratio. What is substitution effect? Same real income, change price ratio. And when you add up all these two, what are you going to get? Change real income and change price ratio, and that we know is the price effect. So in a way, this is an intuitive proof of Slutsky's equation. Once again, price effect can be broken down into substitution and income effects, or in other words, the sum of substitution and income effect equals the price effect.